It is my pleasure to introduce you to Olivia, Shiv, and Brandon. If you look at the schedule, we were supposed to have a guy named Mark from Scalar, which does AI-driven documentation. Air Canada got in his way, so now we have Brandon from Mintlify that also conveniently does AI-driven documentation, so we're just going to swap out a few pieces. We are now going to talk about the process of software development. So we started off by talking about the coding and the programming. Now we're going to talk about all the stuff that happens around it. And so maybe to kick things off, quick introduction to yourself and what is the company that you're working on right now?
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Blok. We're basically building a simulator for product changes, so you can test, design, prototypes, any new product changes you might want to make in your software against synthetic versions of your user base.
Hello everybody, my name's Shiv. I'm the founder of a startup called Loophole Labs. We build inherently more cost-efficient cloud infrastructure. And so like an example is on Kubernetes, we have an integration where we can automatically put idle workloads to sleep, even the stateful stuff like Postgres and Redis. So we just put it to sleep without interrupting customers. All in service of like reducing costs effectively.
Hi, I'm Brandon. And at Mintlify, we're building basically the intelligent knowledge platform. We're most well known for our public-facing developer documentation that powers Cursor, Windsurf, Anthropic's, Claude, and many other leading companies in the world. And people come to us so that all the documentation they write is ready to be used in these LLMs, agents, whatever system.
So maybe to start off, and we'll just sort of go down a little bit, talk a bit about what you worked on before doing this, because I think all of you are working on things that are, as I said, sort of adjacent to programming, but you've all had a lot of experience doing programming and doing some of these things. So why are these important areas, and why are these areas that are, significant opportunities for the application of AI as developers and as people who are living in this world? And maybe start with you, Brandon.
For sure. So prior to working at Mintlify, I was running my own company called Squire. We helped pioneer the AI code review space. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with AI code review. It's having quite a heyday right now, many blockbuster Series Bs. But the short story is like in the software delivery lifecycle, if you think of it as just like any system where it's like we have a bunch of inputs and at the end you have a car. It's like the car is your software and it changes a lot. But like there are many moments throughout that where efficiency gains could exist. We spent a lot of time prior to the sort of LLM era doing that with like data analysis. We had a thing called Dora metrics for all the software devs in the room. Then we called it space metrics. But just like what's the velocity? How can we make it? How do we reduce changes? How do we reduce, production problems? But in the AI code review space, what we realized was as LLMs showed up, the volume of code is going to increase. Each engineer's output threshold is probably going to go up. And the choke point suddenly becomes the code review because sure, I just shipped 12 pull requests, but who's around my team who can review 12 pull requests and get them into the system in a safe way that's predictable and works? So as that happened and that space is kind of growing, joining Mintlify made a lot of sense because one of the other issues in the entire SDLC is getting the right context for context engineering because you need the right inputs in order to build the thing the right way, and these systems are very hungry for that context. And so that's kind of how we saw the shape happening. Being at the forefront of AI code review is hilarious because truly putting in the prompt like this is a matter of national security worked back then. The systems are way better, I'm happy to say. But as we watch this kind of space evolve, everything matters. Like what's the context, the richness, the accuracy, which models you use under the hood, et cetera. So it's been a cool experience.
With Loophole, we kind of started this company on the back of a very technical problem, which was very different, I think, from how most companies should be started. Most companies are started, there's a real-world problem, I'm going to build a solution to that. Whereas we started the company on the back of distributed systems are complicated because stateful workloads cannot move between nodes without interrupting or losing state. So it was a very well-scoped technical problem. It was a very considered impossible problem. And so we started on the back of, well, how do we fix that problem? And once we had done that, then the company went into that, I would say, more important stage, which is, how do we make this useful for people? And we got a little bit lucky in that as we were heading into that stage, like once we had solved this core live migration problem, we were heading into this stage of how do we get people to use this? AI was becoming more and more popular. And so we made a realization that the best way to apply this technology was by making infrastructure easier and more efficient for people to use. Cost is a big factor. That's kind of what we've been focusing on, but also the word that we use inside the company is like accidental complexity. Do I use ARM? Do I use x86? How do I size my EC2 instances? Things that, like, practically speaking, don't matter outside of, things that practically speaking don't matter outside of, esoteric infrastructure design for like large scale systems. Like if you're a developer and you're just starting out, you don't care how big your EC2 instance is other than the bill that comes at the end of the month. And so now that AI is kind of coming in, we realize how much bigger of a problem it is because, like, frankly, AI is not smart enough yet to make those decisions. And we don't know how long it will take before it is, or even if we want it to be that smart, right? Do we want it to just have easy APIs for infrastructure? And then if it's gonna make stupid decisions, do you want to be left with $1 million bill at the end of the day? And so cost efficient and easy to use, those are more important now than ever because we're seeing more and more there is no human in the loop, right? Most of these cloud platforms have MCP servers now. And so your AI can deploy straight to AWS, straight to Railway, straight to Fly. And so having the infrastructure be inherently cheaper, like its DNA is cheaper, it's more cost efficient, it's easier to use. To us, that became a very, very powerful problem. And we're like, if we can apply our tech here, this is where it should be applied because it's gonna impact not just the people today, but also everything being built tomorrow. And that's kind of what you want to be chasing, right? It's a mixture of the two. How do I get people to use it today? How do I make sure even more people use it tomorrow?
From my side, built a few companies in the past, always building products, and could see a lot of limitations of A/B testing. So being a small company, we didn't have Meta, Google-sized traffic that we could run through product changes. So we were trying to think of ways, playing around with simulators and sandboxes, how can we find a way of effectively replicating this traffic. Also worked in the travel industry. You're dealing with a lot of seasonal and cyclical behavior. So if you want to test something, you've got a few months of the year to test it in, and then that's it. So it's sort of how can you clone that behavior and then test against it all year round. So it started off very much a problem we faced ourselves, but quickly saw it was much bigger, and many others face it as well.
So, these three areas, right? A/B testing, kind of infrastructure and moving around workloads, documentation. To somebody who's not a developer, maybe even somebody who is, they seem kind of niche, right? Usually, when some of these developer-centric tools come up, we don't hear about them for a while because, some startups use them and you start building through other startups. Each of you has some very sizable companies that you're working with, right? It's not just startups. So to the extent that you can each give an example of a larger company, right? Whether or not you can name them or not, give us a sense of like, why does this matter? Why isn't this just some weird thing that only programmers care about?
Yeah, so from our side, travel is a big one, again, cyclical behavior, but also where you're dealing with quite sensitive data, so fintech, consumer health. The companies we work with are very sensitive about what they're putting in front of a real-life person. So as a result, there's a lot of compliance and bureaucracy to get any product change through. So why they came to us is they're like, great, we've got this sort of risk-free environment. We could even purposefully test a bad variant just to see what happens, get a bit of a case that we can put forward to then other teams and get buy-in from. So for them, it's just a way of rapidly testing without all the kind of bureaucracy and regulation that comes with it.
So when we started out, we wanted to, I think we did it naively. We picked a use case that seemed interesting. And so what we had picked initially was game servers. We said, okay, can we reduce the cost of running game servers? Because if you're a game company, our thesis was that one of your biggest ongoing costs is the game server, right? And so we said, okay, if we could reduce that, that's a straight up like win for these big companies. And we did a really famous demo at KubeCon where we like moved Minecraft servers between different like continents while people were connected to them. And so that, you know, got us those initial intros, and it's exactly what Chris said, which is like people cared, like the developers cared. They thought it was cool. It was a nerd snipe, but their bosses didn't care. And we learned this concept of new money, which is people don't spend new money on cost reduction as much, and so it's a much harder sell. And so for us, the change from how do we get individual developers to care to now we work with, you know, like publicly traded insurance companies. The core is still save money on your cloud infrastructure, but our positioning is now much more your developers now have the latitude to go and deploy. Like the cost saving is table stakes as far as I'm concerned, right? Without it, this whole thing falls apart. But then like beyond that, how do you position it so that people care deeply, like they'll go to bat for you? You're a startup, this is a big company. Nobody loses their job for buying IBM. We're not IBM. So you can lose your job for buying us. So it's about positioning it so that the developers feel empowered. And I think AI actually did that really well. It's like, you know, when we saw Claude Code and Cursor come out, it was like, how do you get the developers to care about it? If they care about it, eventually the people above them will care about it. Not always, you know, sometimes you have to do a bit of a pincer movement, but to me, that's kind of how we've been able to graduate. But people care about it because it makes their lives easier in a very well-defined, easily explainable way that they can measure. And if you can do that consistently, things become easier over time.
So one of our customers is Anthropic, who make Claude, also Lovable, Bolt, Replit. These are all the tools that you've probably heard about when people joke about vibe coding. It's like you show up, you type a prompt, it makes a product. They want to use Mintlify because what they're doing as a business at a business level, and we could probably all agree, is many people are becoming developers now. We heard this from the first panel. It's like suddenly that product manager, that designer can like make a prototype. And like that's very profound inside of your organization to say, this is what I mean. And then someone interacts with it. So they're on Mintlify because the way in which we construct their documentation makes it so all these people don't have the problem of like having to actually like, we make docs, but they don't have to read the docs. They can just plug it into the LLM of choice. They can ask it to read the docs on their behalf. We do a bunch of stuff to make sure that it's easy to ingest the right context to the LLM. And so they're kind of off to the races. So these businesses care because what's happening is for the first time in a long time, there's an emergent market forming. Whoever calls themselves a builder is growing at an exponential rate. Everybody wants to try this because there's real career risk happening right now. So they need to use these tools. And all of these businesses need to make it so all of them can on-ramp as easily as possible. Like you want to do it in your IDE, we got you. You want to do it in, you know, some AI agent you told to come show up, we got you. You want an MCP, we got you. So this just matters to these dominant businesses, which is allowing them to detach their revenue from classic SaaS structures and move it into a usage-based structure, which, as we've seen, can cause revenue growth to be atmospheric. So it becomes a business risk to not be basically on Mintlify is the short story for these businesses that serve developers, like because they are the ones who need to interact with this complex documentation.
All right, I'm going to ask one more question, and then this time we're really going to open it up to the audience. Since we touched on it a little bit, right, who are you guys each selling to, right? So, you know, I think one of the more interesting aspects of the question I just asked is historically when you're building tools like this, you can't sell to big companies unless you can point to like the little guys that you sold to and you serviced and whatever, and all of you are skipping that. Right? So who is it in these organizations that's like, I don't care that this company's like 18 months old or, you know, that they don't have a website yet or they haven't announced VC funding or all this stuff. We're going to back the truck up and give them money. Like who are the people in the organization who are doing that? And maybe we'll just start with Olivia again.
Yeah, it varies a little bit. To your point, actually, I feel like the functions are a bit bleeding into each other now. So designers are coding, coders are thinking more about design. So we kind of get interest across function. You do have as well those that are sort of the innovation departments. They're just looking at what's out there, new tools. But it tends to be either product or design. They're looking for ways they can stress test their ideas. They're trying to get buy-in for engineering resources. So they tend to be the big ones that pick us up. We are seeing a little bit come from top down as well, so leadership side of things, immersing themselves a lot in some of the new technology that's coming out there, very aware they need to remain competitive, particularly in the world of design and UI. I mean, we're seeing a lot of chat-based apps now. So, okay, if we're going to be injecting UI into this, we've got to make sure it's not adding friction to the process. So it's a big sort of concern that they're thinking about at the moment.
So when we initially started product testing, we were looking at use cases for these companies that we were like, oh, they're not going to want to spend money on this, right? Game service was one of them. The other one was CI/CD. We said, look, it's close to the developers, it's not mission critical as much, and like nobody really likes to pay for CI/CD. So we picked that as our use case. And we ran into one of the problems that I think most startups run into, which is like there are incumbents, there are correct ways. People feel that this is the right way to do something, and it's very hard to change those crystallized behaviors. You can't ask a company to stop using Kafka for your own message bus, or Postgres for your own custom database. It's a heavy push to do. And so that's kind of where this for us, we kind of hit a bit of a brick wall. With AI, it really unlocked a lot of things for us, and it comes back to that new money. A lot of these companies, like there's no winner yet. Even between OpenAI and Anthropic, like there's no winner yet, not clearly, right? People will use both. Even with Cursor, there's Windsurf, right? Like there's no winners yet. And so a lot of these toolings, a lot of these like, this is the right way to do things, those aren't defined yet. And it is much easier to get these larger companies, this new money to care about you when there is no established player in the game. And so an example for CI/CD, which we pivoted away from, was now like AI sandboxes. So we started with CI/CD. We realized people don't really want to spend money on that. It's annoying. It's hard to convince them to care. And then, now, all of a sudden, these same companies that are like, we don't care about CI/CD, they're like, can you save us money on running sandboxes for our AI workloads? And we're like, yes. Why are you running sandbox? But that doesn't matter because that's where the new money is going. They want to run this new infrastructure. They want to be at the forefront of these paradigms. And there is no correct way of doing things. And that gives you the opportunity to come in and show off why you're the best or why your solution is the best. Whereas with like older, well-established flows, you have to fit into those flows and still somehow show that you're better. And that's much more difficult. And it's harder to sell as well. So much easier, thanks to AI, to go after these new use cases where there just is no market incumbent yet, and that could be you, right?
Nice. If you're trying to sell developers, like of all the founders in this room, I'm assuming, if you try to sell a dev tool, there's a few ways to do it. One method that we took that's worked really well is we give away an incredible product for free. So the hobby tier, free tier of Mintlify is like better than the paid tier of all of our competitors. We then do stuff for the enterprise that like enterprises require, which typically means a redlined master services agreement with detailed information on like their service and support. They need guaranteed uptimes. They need this review of some letter of whatever security. So what we do is it's basically just known as product-led sales, but product-led growth, you may know it as. It's like have it for free. Over 25% of YC companies use Mintlify. They just grab it, they use it, they're winning. It's awesome. We do have other methods that lever them into other value that we can build on top of. So there's like a pro tier that starts to serve those that start to scale. And then there's like the custom tier, which is that enterprise moment. So when Coinbase walks in the door, we know that their uptime matters. We know that, making sure the API playground is operating at a certain level for them matters. And so that's how we kind of collapse around the enterprise sales process. And it's worked.
And then just a quick follow-up on that is, if you were to compare Squire and Mintlify, is the budget owner ultimately the same?
Yes and no. So Mintlify is at platform scale. So when we think of an ideal customer profile, we have a few approaches. What's interesting is a chief marketing officer has led the purchase of Mintlify before because they care about marketing to developers to use their product. And the way that we do things, it allows you to actually show up in like answer engine search. I think it's called GEO sometimes, generative engine search. But basically if someone asks in like literal chat GPT, where should I write my docs? Like Mintlify will appear. So other companies want that to happen. So a CMO has bought us. But yeah, it's usually the developer kind of organization, DevRel, heads of those.
Got it. All right, let's throw it out for a couple of questions. Yes, we got one over here. Wait, we got a mic. We got some exercise. Come on.
Pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah.
So many, man. The first and foremost is like validate the need exists and don't do it with software would probably be my approach. With vibe coding now, do it with a prototype. Like just like get as close as you can to the problem, really deeply understand the problem. Like I feel so performative right now, but like first principles thinking, like actually hang out with Claude or something and talk to it and just keep Socratic methoding yourself until you're like, okay, this is actually the problem. Deploy a prototype against that problem set and immediately put that prototype in front of the customer who said this was my problem and just let them use it and see if it works. And if something's gonna work at scale, they're gonna want to use that thing even though it's got 26 bugs and there is a drop down and you have to click from the drop down, and I'm sorry, Dennis, because the drop down works. Yeah. We're gonna have a fight later.
So, but buggy POCs are fine, right? But I think for me, the best advice I could give would be pick a problem. I was telling this to my brother actually just yesterday. Pick a problem that you care so deeply about that it's okay that you're going to get punched in the face every day. So there are a million pitfalls, and we can't outline them all because we don't even know them. We're probably in one right now, and you're going to be in one before you know it. The thing that works is like you care enough that you're going to crawl out, you're going to keep going. Because the thing that, for me, I've seen kill most startups is not because there was a bug in their POC or they made a bad call when talking to a customer or something. The thing that kills them is that they give up because they're like, this isn't going to work. And so having that conviction yourself that like, no, this is necessary, I'll figure out a way to shape it so that people use it and I'm going to fail 50 times. That's fine. That you should. Like if you're not failing 50 times, you're like, I mean, good for you, but that is not how most people do it. Most successful startups are built on the back of falling in those pitfalls. I mean, you can know where they are, but you're gonna fall into them anyway. I did. I knew where they were. I still jumped in both feet.
Yeah, 100% agree with the points. I think as well with speaking to people, there's the initial problem validation side of things, but even once you've built your product, it's very tempting to sit behind the desk. It's comfortable, but what's been super helpful is just constantly speaking to customers every day, and then you start to learn as well the language that they're using, and you can use that in your pitch to investors on your website. You start to attract more like them, and you're not building in a vacuum anymore, and it's something that's usable. And then I think another big factor, as a small company, there's loads of requests that get thrown at you, and people are very excited about how we can use AI in the organization. It's often harder to say no to a lot of things, but the focus is when you've got limited resources, that's the biggest thing. You've got to try and really think through what you want to prioritize and spend those resources on.
Awesome. All right, we got time for one more question.
I'll start. Great question. The short story is this is always an it depends. It's a solid it depends. I'm sorry, I'm going to engineer you. But like, who are you serving? What is the customer? What is the, probably protection levels required around the data that flow through your system? These are all the questions you should ask yourself because like, yes, if you have HIPAA compliant data coming through, the rate at which you need a biocoder to make sure you do not leak that is real soon. If it's, a fun platform where people share cat videos that they're remixing from YouTube, like you're probably all right. Don't link user emails. We're cool. So where you need that is definitely the first, but then the others make sure the business model is going to work for like how you go to market, who you sell, and who your ICP is. If you are trying to vibe code a product that a CIO is going to use, the rate at which you need adult supervision, biocoder with security is, like, again, a lot faster. So figuring out who you're selling into, what requirements they have. A lot of today's world is way less about going out with like top-down marketing using like the pirate framework. It's more, most customers are already so damn educated on what they're gonna buy, why they're gonna buy it, and what problem they're buying to get solved. It's the job to be done. That they're just walking in the door to make sure that you have what they just require in order to buy. So if you sell into the enterprise, understand what the enterprise buyer needs and just work back, and then make sure that you draw your line wherever that's appropriate for the business.
So for the dirty secrets of startups is that even before AI, everything was vibe coded. You didn't have big customers telling you what they wanted, and so you were designing your platform and your software based on the vibes that you felt, as opposed to the vibes that you were able to impart to your AI. And so every software startup goes through these stages of, regardless of AI. Don't ignore that part, right? Like, they go through these stages of like, I think I have built God's gift to software and enough people are using it that I'm gonna go chase bigger customers. Those bigger customers think I'm an idiot. I have to rewrite all of these different pieces to get these, bigger customers. Oh my God, I have to rewrite more of my pieces to get, and so like as you scale up, that will always happen. And that doesn't matter whether ChatGPT helped you write your first iterative or you paid some guy to help you do it or you did it yourself. It will look perfect to you and it will look great to your initial customers. That's why they're your initial customers, and it will need to be rewritten. So I like, my advice would be that nothing has really changed. If it was going to graduate, it was going to graduate. Like, is there enough push? Do you care about it enough? Can you get, use the word adult supervision. That's the word I like to use as well. Can you get adults in the company that can help you write it for that next level of scale? That doesn't matter whether you've written the first prototype yourself or if you had an AI to do it, right? So like, those problems still exist. And so you're gonna see companies fail, you're gonna see companies succeed, but it won't be on the back of whether it was a vibe coded platform. If you've gotten to a point where it needs where you need adult supervision, like, you've already won that first step,
Yeah, I think from our side, some of it's scale, definitely dealing with some enterprise customers, they'll be more sensitive to how something is built. The way I guess we're doing it at the moment, it's based on the maturity of an idea, and it's just a good way initially to vibe code something. We've got all these throwaway interfaces for different ideas that we can test, and then if it warrants more time and resources being put to it, we'll slowly start to bolster out and switch things out. But yeah, from our side, it's just a way of kind of evolving an idea and making it more testable.
Awesome. Well, Olivia, Shiv, Brandon, thank you so much. And ask these guys questions as you see them during the day.